This week, our scriptural focus will be Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 to 22. This part of the letter focuses on the unity that God desires in the church and how in Christ God has brought together both Jews and Gentiles into a new multi-ethnic family that is one in Christ. We begin today with Ephesians 2, verses 11 and 12, which describes once again, and part of what we're going to see going through Ephesians in such an in-depth manner is how Paul comes back to the same themes and issues and images repeatedly. And that continues today as he talks again about life outside of Christ, or life without Christ. He says, "So then, remember that at one time you Gentiles by birth," or in the Greek it says in the flesh, "called the uncircumcision by those," and here Paul is saying by those of us who are called the circumcision, a physical circumcision made in the flesh by human hands. Remember that you were at that time without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers or outsiders to the covenant of promise. And then here's the key: having no hope and without God in the world. The point Paul is trying to make, and remember, he's writing to the Ephesian church, which is largely made of Gentiles. He's saying, hey, all of you who are not Jewish, all of you who are not circumcised, if you will, that you were aliens from the commonwealth of Israel. You weren't part of that inside group to whom the covenants and the promises had been given. And so because you are outside that, Paul's Jewish heritage tells him that you have no hope and you're without God in the world. I want to take this a little deeper from just talking about distinctions between Jews and Gentiles to encourage you to think about the loneliness of living apart from God. Because I think that's more deeply what Paul is writing about, which is true both for Jews and Gentiles. The loneliness of living apart from God. And I think Paul would say this is truly the root of all feelings of alienation. That when we live or try to live a life apart from God, there is a hole, there is a space. As St. Augustine would say many, many hundreds of years later, our hearts are restless until they find rest in thee. And that's a reflection of what Paul is saying here, that without God, we are without hope in the world. And that's not a place we want to be. I'm actually filming this spot the day after the Super Bowl. And for some of us, if we don't have a team playing in the Super Bowl, the commercials become almost more interesting than the game. And there were two ads that were run by the Christian group called He Gets Us. And one of those ads reflected a number of people who we might look at on the surface and say they look like they have no hope, that they're alienated perhaps from themselves or from other people or from people who are different than they are. That's not a place where we want to be, living without Christ, without God, without hope. I hope that your hope is in God and in Christ. I suspect it is if you're watching these videos. And we want to make sure we share that hope with others who feel alienated or lost.